Welcome to my story, episode 5.
Well, we'll not get back to episode 4, but we will talk to you about where we left you in my time frame of my reality, at least my reality at the time, 2005, and I left you on March 12th. Well, I left you on the way into the cuckoo's nest for the first time. I went through the cuckoo's nest more times than Jack. I got Jack surrounded on that notion. Anyway, so the thing about that is, well, I slept for 3 days, got out. But here was the point. I wanted to bring out many points to this story, actually a long story. So, okay, here's the point. Let me close the door. Okay. So, the only way you can understand the context of this insane story is sort of to understand the context of what I described to you before. I sort of just briefly touched upon that I was looking through the Bible codes when I found, and I'm far from an expert, God encoded God as truth. And it was something in that, well, you know, when you think about it, if there were messages that could be decoded in the first 5 books of the Torah, we could actually have a future already sitting in the hands of people that could be reading our future and our plan. Okay, and so what would that future possibly be? And so what I imagined is that the future, and this is where it ties to your religious traditions, especially along the Abrahamic line, which, in my view, just to set the record straight, I can't see, if I do the generic genealogy math, how we're not all descended from Adam and Eve, how we're not all descended from Abraham, how we're not all basically Jews. But that's at least a symbolic, if nothing else, reference. And, well, Jesus was a Jew, and I don't think if you asked Jesus at the time, are you a Christian? He'd say, what the heck is a Christian? Anyway, that's another story. And, well, we'll ask the freaking Muslims whether, if they believe in the Torah, and they believe in Abraham and Moses and what have you, and they believe in the gospel of Jesus, if they're not, if their prophet wasn't a Jew too. And I mean that with all due respect to the great prophet Muhammad, because I look at it as part of one paradigm. But just imagine that instead of the notion that we would be saved by divine intervention, imagine the notion that our divine intervention is already in our books. It's already known that the divine intervention required is an intervention of our own intelligent design. An intervention, well, for some might see it as thus spake Zarathustra, of man becoming in the image of God. For all of that, what that might mean. Because the combination of man and our power, we will be creating something new in the future, and how we control it, and how we create it, and whether we let it create us, or whether we create it ourselves for our own benefit, is a choice that we must make. But that was the notion that I had, and the simple plan was so simple, and that's why it's sort of as a blow your mind thing. Because if it is possible to create peace on earth, and creating peace on earth creates so much more value, and create a monetary global economic system with one global currency that eliminates corruption because it's directly connected to the people, a global bank. And, well, imagine disintermediating all the corrupt powers and practices. Well, that might be hard to imagine, but if we put our heads together and our technologies that we know we have available together, and we put our capital together, and we restructured our global enterprise. See, not the little slow steps, but like take 100 years progress in 7 years. That's right, 99 years in 7. 1 year 90, whatever those numbers are, advance the rate of change and will advance the state of prosperity for humanity. And, well, you can sort of do the math on that. So, why must it get biblical? Because how on earth could you explain how we could come along by the world a new future that we didn't, well, I don't want to take away and blaspheme the possibility of future needs for divine intervention. But I think our best choice is to use the intervention of our own lessons, to use the intervention of our own knowledge and teaching, of our own science, of the morality instantiated in our religion, and to use that to create a better future for all of ourselves and all of us prosperity, not just for the few, but for the many. And we will find that what's good for the many is good for the few. Now here's where I might just let's expand on these biblical paradigms. And, well, so it was sort of interesting because I asked some kids when I came out on the Ides of March 2005 what the value of California was, but I asked them, what do you do when you're Bill Gates rich? And Bill had already tipped away his hand. He took his many, many billions, said, I'll keep $1 billion for the kids, and then I'll pay it forward with the rest of it. And then he got his friend Buffett to do the same. But there's many like-minded billionaires, and they would easily direct their capital better if we monopolized charity and directed it to building humanitarian enterprises that were better delivering technologies and better delivering advancement of prosperity and lifestyles of at least the well-fed around the world. And so, well, you'll find that it can't be done with just the rich, but it needs the power of nations, because actually when you do the math, a lot of it is still controlled and owned by what were communist nations. But let's get down to the point. Okay, I talked about Ayn Rand, but see, what she had was a limited going struck vision. But Atlas would never shrug, and the smart Atlases, all the time with an internet, would get their minds together and would say, what if we put our capital together? What if we put our enterprises together? What if we put our intellectual property together? What if we built our best roadmaps without worrying about who had what patent and what have you? Because we're advancing technology for the state of all mankind. And, well, we could build things for the rich at such a pace that within a year, something we build that might be only available to a billionaire could start to become a billionaire, well, available to the middle class, and then another 2 years or 5 available to the poorest and other, because technology, well, it's just mind, it's just cold and sand, and lots of machines and a few little jumps. But, well, there's lots of things that we can do to improve our world better, by process change too, by eliminating governments and creating one enterprise of us. But see, here's the question. You see, in Ayn Rand's vision that, well, anointed the greatness of individuality, which you must never lose. But she looked at the people who couldn't take care of themselves as moochers. Now, there were also moochers in the political system that she recognized, or the moochers of ideas, and those will always be moochers. But she looked at those who couldn't take care of themselves sort of as moochers, or at least somebody calls it that. But the thing is, what do you do with the people? I mean, one could argue that you just go back to the Nazi days, and what you don't need, you eliminate those people and we're better off with fewer people. But the economics don't work with that, because your economy shrinks. Because an economy is built on consumption. The only value of investment is to be able to create, well, you invest in a future of more consumption, more value. We can't create more consumption. We can't grow our prosperity. And so, if you don't recognize that we must start with consumers, that we must start at the bottom, if we created a world and provided to those people across the world to live on less than $2 a day, and said, listen, we're going to put every day $2 a stock in the future of Earth into your bank account, but you can't cash it. It's going to create dividends for you. But this stock in the future of Earth will create dividends in your account. And, well, could we afford $2 a day for those, half the world's billions? Well, that's a simple math question, but actually, with a bank, and you could ask, and that's why I put Alan Greenspan in charge of your business bills. I hope you could figure it out, or he figured it out then, or he's still around when he's asked the question. If we had our own bank, backed by all the gold in the world, backed by all the reserves of oil and coal, and backed by the resources of the earth, because see, here's the problem. As soon as you grow prosperity by recreating our economic system, advancing trade, advancing an economic system by a flow of wealth that you've never imagined, as soon as you do that, you will put stress on the cost of the resources, which means sort of what you call inflation. However, if the bank of our enterprise already owns the resources, then as the value of those resources that are in our banks go up, well, the value of our currency goes up. So the value of this, like inflation, gets balanced off. But the point is that if there is inflation, we make profits on that, and it goes back to our bank. And the point is, we have to buy the world first for the people, because it wouldn't be just for the rich to buy the world for themselves and say, well, you could pay off the people, but see, we got to pay off the people well, because the thing you'll find is when the people do well, the people at the top get way richer, their investments go great grow, and more than that, they could actually live among us without fear. Because in my world, all the guns on the planet are chopped in half. And if you want guns, they're put in hunting reserves, and they're tagged and tracked. And well, we wouldn't have danger, because our rich and famous would be our best assets. We couldn't allow anyone to die. We couldn't. See, now all of a sudden, we are angels, and our stars become atlases and angels of all kinds of dimensions. And, well, we must protect our stars from the top to the bottom. And we will see the sanctity of the message. That to kill an innocent person, to kill a single innocent person, is as if you killed all mankind. How can anybody conduct any war? And wasn't the gospel to turn the other cheek? How can you ignore? See, we look at the lessons and we say, I don't know, we say because there was war all over the Bibles we were meant to war. They were all over the Bibles because those were our practices. But that was because that was the practice we must kill. The only war worth killing is the only war that is just as the war, and that's the war in the battlefield, in the boardrooms, between the rights and the lefts, between ideas that are in conflict. But if you get to the round of the right and left, you'll see them as a yin and a yang. They can't survive without each other. The top would destroy itself if it continues to gather wealth at the top of the pyramid, because the pyramid will collapse upon itself. And a pyramid built strong from the bottom can grow infinitely, and the top will infinitely achieve its reach to the stars. That's simply the geometry of it all. And the numbers are 0, 1, pi, and the letters D, star, 0, 1, pi, D for disintermediation, and stars are infinite. Hello, we're back to, well, they call this the tail end overtime of episode 5. Hopefully it gets into episode 5. I think I have at least an extended version. I can go beyond the 15-minute limit on my YouTube. Okay, so here's what I wanted to just point out, because we started talking about it and I wanted to finish. We talked about the gospel of Jesus and what was the most important thing, and we were talking about the only just war is the war on war, and that from the beginning of time, my philosophy, my belief was, and if I think you look at your book, from the beginning of time we were destined to achieve peace on earth. The question is, do we achieve that from divine intervention, or has God already intervened and, well, he given us the power to save ourselves? And so, in terms of war, how could you have war at all if you were turning the other cheek? And that's why I think you have to look at all of our religious teachings not as a broad spectrum of all truth, but you have to look at it as a pyramid of truth, as what are higher truths and what are bigger truths and what are littler truths and what are lies, because a lot of this whole structure is like a Tower of Babel. Your entire reality, in my premise, was like a beautiful lie of God or our own design, and that gets strange, but we won't go there. But let's just stay with that. So the thing is, if one was to look at Christianity, in my view, and I'm not a minister or anything, I have a friend who's a minister and he's an atheist. That's sort of an oxymoron, isn't it? Anyway, so here's the thing. I think the primary thing is turn the other cheek, okay? As long as you're turning the other cheek, you're not fighting, okay? Secondary thing is, hey, do unto others if you have them, do unto you. If you're doing that, you're not doing bad to other people. In fact, if you're doing better than you'd have them do to you, well then what? Just imagine that world. Okay, that's the top of the Christianity pyramid from now on out. It's all part of it, but these are interesting stories. How does a rich man get to heaven? Or how does a rich man get to heaven? It's as difficult as flying your camel through the eye of a needle. What we talked about last part of the beginning of this episode, we've talked about Bill Gates. Well, you get a rich man through heaven by paying it forward. For a rich man to see beyond the wealth of the world as we know it, to the greater wealth of the greater humanity, of the greater possibilities of us, which is the true instantiation of man becoming God in the image of God. That is our path to our future. And Jesus, well, if he was symbolically or reality the Son of God, then he was the best image we would have known. And so, they said, the meek shall inherit the earth. Well, how was the meek going to inherit the earth? And that's why it tied to my Atlas Shrugged plan. Very simply, have atlases as angels, buy out the world, and give it to the meek. Now Jesus said, and I learned this from a minister in Disneyland, and it was very impressive, I'd heard it before, that when Jesus returned, he would separate between the meek and the goats, the sheep and the goats. Well, I call them the meek, but the sheep and the meek. He would separate between the sheep and the goats, and the meek shall inherit the earth. But what does that mean? Well, I don't want to take away all the other meanings, because in the multitudes of meanings of things we find many truths. But there are really sometimes only one black and white truth. And my favorite face of the name of Allah, beyond the name of Allah, is my favorite face is Al-Haq 51, which is the truth. And well, so the truth is very important. Now, in one paradigm, which is just sort of a view, but it's a view that ties to what we need as an enterprise and for our religions and for our societies. And that is this. The Galt that you see is not the Galt you might have known if you interpreted that word before the days of Muhammad Ali. See, the Galt is the greatest of all time. If we interpret it through that as the greatest of all time, must be allowed to lead, and the sheep must be able to allow to survive and enjoy life, but stay out of the way and create more Galts out of sheep. Well, we have a virtuous process where people that want to be Galts can be Galts and enjoy the benefits of being Galts. And those who wish to be sheep will be able to be sheep and enjoy a life. Well, whatever sheep of your fantasy sheep might want to be. And you don't have to actually be sheep, but it's the notion that we all must sort of recognize that we're in this world and a future writing one's story together. And so we'll leave it at 6 minutes over time.